Is this the most important week of trades that you could be making for 2025? Some might say that's a little hyperbolic, but I think with what we've got to deal with, best 22 and some critical pieces to our team now out, what you do this week may just set you up for the rest of your fantasy football year. Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. On this week's strategy session, we got to talk about what to do with Will Day. He is out for months, while Nathan O'Driscoll, this is not the reason I wanted to bring him up on the pod. He's out for at least a month. We've got to talk about that. It is best 22. That changes a whole bunch of variables for us. We need to unpack that. We've got to talk rookie fix-ups, the last couple that we might be looking at. And there's still a stank of a couple of mid-prices in our team. We will talk about all that and more. But before we get into any of that, joining me on this week's strategy session is fellow Coaches panelist. The moment we were talking Nathan O'Driscoll, he just magically appeared, but it is not for the reasons that we want. MiniMonk, good to be chatting with you on this week's strategy session. And my gosh, we already had one forced trade for 75% of the comp with Riley Bice having to come in. Now with Day out, Noddy out, this week is an absolute classic for the moves that we're going to make in our teams.
Oh, it's an absolute doozy. And I think you were bang on when you said it might be the most important week of trades. We normally talk about those early rounds of the season being pretty important trades. I think if you can get it right this week, you're going a long way to be able to separate yourself from the pack because, man, there is going to be so much carnage already. We've already had, and we're not even at the Wednesday night team, let alone the Thursday night teams, let alone the late changes, let alone the Friday night extended benches cut, gather round, everyone's in Adelaide. We're in for a hell of a ride this week.
I'll be honest, about 12 hours ago before we started this podcast, I said to Minnie, look, mate, number one topic I want to cover this week is bench hygiene, making sure you got good depth, good coverage, sort all your green dots out. And he goes, yeah,
out the window like already.
Out the window, because we knew Noddy was going to miss. We do have a defined timeline. And as much as we hate it, at least now that we know he's 4 to 6 weeks, we know what to do with that. And then out of nowhere, late on a Tuesday, Will Day comes out. And maybe that's where we start. A guy that's priced at almost $850K in fantasy. He's gone up $84K over the season. So he's done something for you. But you held him through the bye if you're an owner to really get through this gather round week where then the fixture, there's like a month that's probably as gravy and as gold as you could ever ask for an inside mid. While in SuperCoach, he has dropped a little bit of cash, but he's given you some tons along the way. Just over 480,000. Again, averaging that ton. It's just horrible luck. There's nothing more than it. Horrible luck. You held for a reason. The logic was sound. You just got fantasy footballed. That's all I can say is this is the wrong side of luck for you. What do we do here, Mini? Because in one format, it's not too far. It's about, in fact, both formats. So it's probably only about 100 to 150K to the top of the tree mids. Is that where we're going? Or to you across the formats, is there still some value and some moves we could be making?
Look, I know that you're trying to separate the players in this conversation, but I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about Will Day and Nathan O'Driscoll in combination.
Sure.
For those who have Will Day, and most coaches I think would have Nathan O'Driscoll as well, I think it is really as simple as a one down, one up kind of week. Use the cash, take Nathan O'Driscoll down. Hopefully you've got some DPP to be able to take him to the player that you're wanting to, be it in AFL Fantasy or Riley Bice if you've missed them, or in SuperCoach or in Dream Team, someone like a Clay Hall or Isaiah Dudley or Travalia if you're looking for that as well. And then just take that 200K, that you make from that trade and chuck it on top of Will Day and take your pick. And this is part of the reason why in the start of this, but I was saying this is the moving week because not only have we been dealt a bit of carnage, but with carnage kind of creates the opportunity. You're now in a position where you can take a pick of whoever you want. If you want to go for that value player that you think can be a top 8 midfielder or a top 6 forward or a top 6 defender from now until at least the buys, if not the end of the season, you have the opportunity to take your pick at whoever you want with that. If you want to go right to the top of the tree and bring someone in who is a genuine captaincy option because you feel you're liking that, that's the way you can go. If you want to get funky in SuperCoach or in Dream Team and go for someone like a Kieran Briggs and go to a 3-ruck setup, that is within the realm of possibilities now. So with chaos creates opportunity, and in the situation with someone like Will Day, it gives you the opportunity to go to whoever you want.
And the beautiful thing is we're now got 2 months of clear air. I do want to talk about best 22s and what that could mean for us soon, but that's the beauty. These 3, 4, 5 poor scores that we've been so accustomed to falling out of our team, depending on the format you play, that's gone now. So the opportunity to buy into the Greens, the Merritts, the Brayshaws, Sarongs, the Dawsons, take your pick through the mids, let alone, as you reference, the fact that if you've got a Sinclair or a Horn Francis sitting in your teams, you can now go and get the other guy at the opposite end of the field that you want. So it does create a series of new opportunities. But for coaches that don't own Day, because I think you're right, Day and Noddy, if you're owners of them both, you handcuff those moves together and you just go one down, one up. And then in SuperCoach Dream Team, you're probably boosting for another cash cow movement of regeneration of funds, whether that be through deconing Fraser, whether you're getting rid of Wicks, Stone, etc. That's the kind of the move you're doing. But if you're just a Noddy owner, that's a little harder. Again, he's jumped up over 200K in fantasy already this year and probably had another 100K to make, given how good this Fremantle fixture we're coming into was. This is what hurts probably the most, isn't it? Is we're about to get the back-to-back. Oh, this one hurts.
It's okay, but it gives you the opportunity because, you might not have that, 500K or 300K midfielder, but you can, if you want to go back to the Fremantle well, Brayshaw and Sarong also have that back-to-back fixture if that's where you're wanting to go as well. But I cut you off. You want to finish your spiel about the bench hygiene sort of thing?
No, you're turning into Rids more and more every week, except we can see you. Outside of, like it's different because you don't have as many options. Yeah, he's made you 100K in Supercoach, 200K in fantasy, but 642K in fantasy to get anybody really that you want, it's a minimum of 200K, closer to 350. Depending on what you want to do, while SuperCoach, again, probably that minimum 200K, probably up to 300K. The other thing we've got going alongside the Nathan O'Driscoll discussion is we've got Riley Bice for 75% of the competition, who are probably getting rid of a Sam de Koning and a Joel Fraser. So how are we going to prioritize all these things? Because if you're just a Noddy owner, you're going, do I want to just jump over to a Clay Hall? Do I want to jump over to a Tom Gross, who's a fantasy, at least option, or a Caden Cleary, who's there? Do I get into the Marich if I missed him? How do we use this? Because you can't hold him for 4 to 6 weeks. You just can't do that. It is a trade.
But you can hold him for 1 week.
Okay. Talk me through that.
And this is where I want to get right, because you just talked about the defender issues in Fraser and Sam de Koning. And in my mind, Fraser is a much more significant issue than Sam de Koning, because at least de Koning's still relatively going up in price and has, even as an intercepting type defender, a relatively safe floor on him. I don't really expect him to go lower than maybe about a 50-55 on Thursday night against Adelaide. It's not going to be nice with that on your field. But if that's what he does, he drops maybe 5-10K. You can move him next week if you really have to. If Fraser down to Bice makes you a couple of 100K, that's probably nearly enough to get you from someone with Nathan O'Driscoll if you're wanting to go there. If you've got another failed mid-price, you can also move that as well. But Nathan O'Driscoll plays on the Sunday early game. And you just think about some of the teams that are playing before then in that round. We've got Geelong with, like, if you've held a Nevitt and he's back in, or a Closey. We've got Sydney with someone like a Caden Cleary playing. We've got a Corey Warner also playing. Collingwood also playing. Someone might have a Long. Finn O'Sullivan could be back in. We've
Lindsay
got
could
Ashcroft.
be back.
We've got Lindsay that potentially could be back. We've got Sardis who could be back for Supercoach and Dream Team players as well. What Nathan O'Driscoll might allow you to do, if you're wanting to get a little bit funky, is say, I want to have a look at one of these players. I want to be able to potentially loop on a bigger score because we're going into best 18 and potentially save myself. Say someone like a Finn O'Sullivan who hasn't shown a massive ceiling yet. If he goes a 50 against Gold Coast, you just say, I'm going to take that on. I'm going to take that on and I'm going to field someone like a Xavier Lindsay off the injury. But if he goes all of a sudden to 70, you say, right, maybe there's a world where I hold Nathan O'Driscoll. So I think there is a world where you can hold him for the week if you're looking to get a loophole in and give yourself that opportunity to be able to look at a couple of your midfield rookies. It's obviously in the position where I'm suggesting this, where you've got other mid prices that have to go. And in my mind, the biggest one that has to go this week is Joel Frazier.
Agree.
I don't think there's anyone else who is as big of a priority as him. I think Nathan O'Driscoll and Will Day are in that next tier, although I would consider Will Day as more of a fallen premium, and unfortunately he's done for the season. And you know, as I've posted on X, he'll be a value pick for us in 2026 at this rate as well. Not again. And Tom Stewart 2.0.
Oh, not again.
But I think that if you can trade out of two of those three, that's the worst way to do it. And I think you probably want to trade the two that have the most value on their heads, which is probably Frazier and Day. So that's the pathway to be able to hold O'Driscoll.
Yeah, it's true. Where's your thought on kicking the can down a road with an injury, though? Because, again, Frazier, if you started Frazier, I think it hasn't been a failure because you got those round 1, round 2 scores that were solid. Where it's been a failure is you traded into him, and it was best 18. When you traded into him heading into round 3 and you've got no good scores, and credit to you, like you put that on the radar of it was his final score or final quarter scores that was really driving it home. But talk to me about the theory, because often we don't like to kick the injury can down the road for another week. Why are you saying then, look, Frazier as a playing option is more critical to move out? Is that because of Bice being the outlet as the reason, or is there something a little more to it than just that?
I think Bice being the outlet is obviously part of it. I think a lot of coaches are actually looking to field 2 rookie defenders this week in Bice +1, be it a trainer, be it a Pryor, be it a Reed, that they're happy enough to put in at that D6 spot. I think they're all viable options this week. And I think that trading someone like a Frazier allows you to be able to do that, unless you already had that DPP link with someone like a Sinclair or a Holmes. You didn't really have that link available to you. The other reason why is, Frazier's going down in price. O'Driscoll, while he's not playing, isn't going to move price. And Frazier's gone, like in AFL Fantasy, his break-even's already gone to 89. He's only beaten that in 1 week. And it was in round 1 against North Melbourne. I wouldn't be backing him to beat that again. And if a player's losing you cash and you can move them to a player that's moving up in cash fast, they've just got to go. So combine the fact that he's moving in price, find the fact you've got Riley Bice, and combine the fact that Nathan O'Driscoll allows you to loop in your midfield. That's the reason why I say he's a higher priority.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. And I know we were talking about Sam de Koning too, and the ability to hold him. What hopefully you've got is you've got the combination of or a combination of trainer, Reed, Pryor, let alone now Bice. There's nothing that can stop you from putting the E on de Koning, putting him on the bench, because it probably will be a challenging matchup with the 3 Crows tall forwards that they've got to compete against. Whereas the matchups for the Pryor and Reed, you'd feel like against Melbourne, the amount of poor ball entry that Demons forward line is serviced with feels favourable to lots of intercepts, lots of transition marks. I wouldn't be opposed to just benching de Koning for the week, taking the 5, 10, 15K that you might be able to bank out of him. Now, teams could change that. There's no Stanley. He's back in the ruck and it's a moot reflection. But to me, I think you've got options for there, because so often, even a week ago, we were talking about with Pig mentality around the hesitancy around having 2 rooks on field in our defensive line. But I'm actually quite comfortable for it to be this week. Every week it evolves and changes, but this week, Bice, one of those Melbourne opposition defenders, being the Essendon boys, I'm very comfortable to have 2 of them on field without any concerns whatsoever. Talk to me then about some trade targets that we can look at here, because again, we've listed a few now. On our YouTube channel already, there's an AFL Fantasy Trade Targets episode that comes out on a Monday late afternoon. On a Wednesday late afternoon, we do the SuperCoach one. So you may be watching or listening to this and that episode hasn't dropped yet. If it has, you can go and check it out. But if we're sort of in that 500 to 600K price range in SuperCoach and that 850 to 950 range in fantasy, who are the guys that capturing your attention? Because I still want to ask you about the $1 million guys in fantasy, the 600K plus guys in SuperCoach. But who are the guys that are catching your attention? Are you looking for the quote unquote just good fixtures over the next month premiums, or are you looking for someone you think would be a quote unquote top 8 mid for the end of the year? What's your approach with what you'd be doing there if you were trading up into a primo-ish mid?
It's a little column A, little column B. You are looking for someone that can at least go close enough to being that top 8 midfielder. If you're spending up, if you're going into that 500K bracket in SuperCoach, you're at least wanting someone that's going to hold you through until their buy, if not longer. And same in AFL Fantasy, because you don't really want to be having to trade one of these types of premium guys out during this upgrade cadence period where you've got to be hitting them one after another. And so combined with the fact that you want someone that's a top 8 mids, combined with the fact that you want someone that's a little bit of value, you also want someone that's relatively durable as well, particularly if you're taking on risk. That's obviously offset by price tag. That's where someone like Tom Stewart becomes a different conversation, because he's cheap, because he's had an injury, he's popped a good score, and he's coming back in. He's someone you can afford to wait a week on. As you just talked about, that Adelaide matchup isn't the best, but he's someone that I'd definitely be having on my radar, if not this week, next week. There's a lot of talk in the community about the two Freo guys. I know that Caleb Strong comes in under that $1 million marker in AFL Fantasy, whereas Brayshaw's over it, whilst they're both in that 500 to 600K bracket in SuperCoach. They are both very good options, especially for the fact that they are captaincy options for the next 2 weeks, being against Richmond and against Melbourne. In a similar vein, another player that has snuck down and is actually under $900,000 in AFL Fantasy is Tim Taranto, who comes into a better run of fixtures and has really only had the one bad game so far this year, and is someone that has done 110 stretches before in a relatively poor Richmond side. Another that I've been looking at as well is a Tom Green, who has a relatively favourable run of fixtures, and a lot of people have turned off of him because of the preseason niggles and then also the early bye. And then if we're looking for other fallen premiums other lines, I think Jason Horne-Francis, if you don't own, is someone that you really do actually have to consider. The form has turned. Butters is back into that team. They're playing at home in front of probably what they'll get as their biggest crowd of the home and away season, bar the showdowns.
Yeah.
If there's ever a time for Port Adelaide to have to turn it around, it's going to have to be this week. There's going to be a bit of a grudge match associated with it against Hawthorn, with all of the stuff that went down between those two teams in their meetings during the 2024 season. Two very fantastic games, but two games that were controversial for different reasons.
Sure.
I think that there's a lot of different options, and I'm not going to say that one of them is better than the other, because it's obviously going to depend on what your risk tolerance is, how much money you've actually got to be able to spend, and potentially what your buy structure is, because as we're starting to go into this upgrade season, you do have to start to considering your buys. Granted, they are a bit easier this year, but it is a heavy point of consideration to have a relatively even spread. But I think that there's close to a dozen options across the formats, be it different names, obviously, between SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy Dream Team, that are worthy of consideration this week. So I would implore coaches to really do their homework and try and figure out what best suits how they want to play the game.
And looking at who's playing who this week, the worst thing in fantasy football, my gosh, is making an upgrade. And while you're thinking future focused, which you absolutely should, don't miss the thing that's right in front of you. So for illustration's sake, I'd love to trade into a Nick Dacos, because we'd love to have him in our fantasy and SuperCoach teams at some point during the year. But you just know he's walking into that James Jordan tag this week. You just know it's coming, and there's nothing worse than paying up a ton and it not being an unfortunate circumstance failed score, quote unquote. And by that, like a Dane Zorko last week, because everything read the room it was going to be a bang for your buck pick. It's a lot of cash, but everything pointed towards it. That's a little bit of bad luck. Trading into a Nick Dacos, okay, in 5 rounds' time, it might be fine. But this week, you're probably trading into a 70 or 80 in fantasy and an 80 and a 90 on a good day against a James Jordan tag. So keeping that immediate focus without losing the future focus, I think's important. You referenced the fact that we're in best 22, meaning no longer for 8 weeks Thank goodness. Are we dealing with best 18? The fact that a quarter of our year is best 18, like, is ridiculous to me. That's not having a go at any of the formats. To me, it's just ridiculous that's how so much of the year is, because it just compresses score. It alleviates the bad scores that have fallen off. Teams get protected by some stuff, and I've benefited from it over time in my fantasy time. But to me, I'd rather just be a sucker for punishment and just go, what's better for the casual and better for all is every week's best 22 or every week's best 18. Like, keep it a little consistent. But does heading into best 22 for the next 8 weeks, does that change the plans and structures and trades that you're looking at, not only this week, but for the next two? Or to you, is that almost a moot thought now, and it's just knowing that crap scores are going to hang around?
Oh, you know it does, MJ. You know that best 22 changes the map a lot. We've now had 4 weeks of scores and 3 weeks of best 18 as well, to know which rookies are actually reliable in our fields and which ones aren't. And we've actually, it's actually changed the way that we view a lot of our rookies as well, because I went into the season thinking, I'm not going to be happy fielding one defender rookie at D6, let alone having 2 on field. And now we're 4 weeks into the season, I'm thinking, I want to try and change my structure to be able to put 2 on field. And I think a lot of coaches are feeling a very similar way. The biggest thing that you've got to consider with your best 22 is who are you actually fielding and who are you benching, because unless you've got red dots hanging around, which we all really don't want to have at this time of the year, you don't get to have those chances to be able to loop. You don't get those chances to be able to have a look at a particular player and see what they've scored before you then commit to actually putting them on your field. You don't get that free player. If a player scores a 30 or a 40 for you, they're going to drop out of your scores. Every score counts, except in Dream Team and SuperCoach, you get that 23rd score dropping out. But in AFL Fantasy, you've got to have your structure right. You're looking at your mid rookies, you're thinking, how many of Nathan O'Driscoll, not Nathan O'Driscoll, how many of Ashcroft, Lindsay, Moraes, Finn O'Sullivan, Nevitt, Closey? Yeah. How many of these do you actually want to have on your field this week? How many of your forward ones do you want? Do you want to field Davidson? How are you feeling about a Connor Stone? How are you feeling about a Joe Barry or an Isaac Kako? Like, these are the sorts of questions you need to be having, and they should be dictating a lot of the trading that you're making this week and potentially next week as well, so that you can structure yourself to be able to fit the rookies in the right spots in your team. Because as much as rookies dictate structure in the preseason, they dictate our structure as we're coming back into best 22 as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, this week feels, we've talked about it being moving week, but teams are desperately hoping and holding on to a Xavier Lindsay. I know some moved him on last week, and I don't think that was I wouldn't say it's a wrong decision. It's too far to say it's a right or wrong call. If he's back this week and plays a full game and you can't get back into him and he continues on as he was pre-injury, sure, that's probably then the wrong call. But it's way too early to do that was right, that was wrong on certain in-season trades just yet, especially like that. Mitch Nevitt trained on Tuesday in the main session. Again, you might be listening to this and know he's already named or not, but it seems like it's at least a close option. Then you've mentioned Noddy, you've mentioned some of these other guys that are rolling through there. Where are you looking at prioritizing these rookie fix-ups versus the forced injury trades that we've got to deal with alongside the best 22? Because these rookie fix-up trades, there's only one that's screaming at people, and that's Bice. And the good news is he started the weekend once lockout lifted at like 20-25% ownership across the formats. He's basically in 40-50% now across them. And that should only gain.
You look at the AFL Fantasy trading statistics and it just tells you the big picture, because he's the number one traded-in player. He's been traded in by 22,000 coaches this week, and the next highest player is at 3,500. That tells you how obvious of a move it is this week, and it tells you how many coaches have actually missed him, because this is on a Tuesday night that we're recording this.
It's true.
There's a lot of teams that won't do their trades until the Wednesday or the Thursday, or even the Friday night, and look at their teams. And if you're seeing that many people moving into a play, you can tell you how many people have missed him.
But outside of Bice, with these rookie moves that you've got to make again, we talk about O'Driscoll having to go, Lindsay and Nevitt, if they're back this week, that's a great hold. Whether it be intentional or circumstantial, sometimes it almost doesn't matter how you got there. But there's almost no other rookie that's screaming at us this week across the formats. Like Hall looks solid in his scoring and job security at West Coast. You could say Langford's job security looks solid at Melbourne. And again, just a week ago, where people were just lauding his brilliance, and now he wasn't as great against Geelong. You've got a Caden Cleary for probably AFL Fantasy only this week. You've got Dudley, who is the bottom of prices you could possibly get in Dream Team at SuperCoach. You talk about it being diverging moments for not only upgrades, but also for downgrades, because if you've already got Bice, it does feel a little bit like the world is your oyster about what you could do with your rookies, because we are getting to some fattened options already in the season.
This is where I think you can get a bit funky. And I'm using that word a lot this week. I think, as you mentioned, I think Clay Hall is a pretty nice pickup in SuperCoach. A lot of coaches might be tempted to wait the week for Tom Gross in SuperCoach. I think I would go with Hall because he is that in-under player. I would hope, for West Coast's sake, that they'd start giving these guys consistent games, because they need to be able to rebuild that midfield. And I think that those two are good enough players to build it around. And I wouldn't object to coaches in AFL Fantasy from looking at a Tom Gross or even a Caden Cleary this week, depending on the downgrade that they're needing. But in the traded numbers, I think it's actually really interesting that we've got those three as three of the top four. You've got a Lockie Whitfield in there as the third best option for people trading into, which I think feels a bit, it feels like a chase. It's definitely chasing. It's chasing someone who's at the top price. It's chasing someone who's just had the pop score. But I think it's really interesting that the number 5 traded in player is actually a player that I would recommend for coaches that they didn't get last week. It's actually Ryan Marriage.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think if you've missed him, it's actually not too late to get on, because he managed to pop a 73 in a very tough matchup. He had the exact role that we wanted to see. And, it's been talked about a lot in the other fantasy podcasts that I've listened to today, and a few of the group chats that in. He is clearly a bit of a pig, because he did a little sidestep out of the square, came back into it, and then kicked it out just so he got that extra kick for himself and also for us fantasy coaches. So he knows that he is a fantasy player. If he goes at 75 to 80 between now and his bye, that is an absolute knockout pick. Even if he goes at 70 to 75, it's a knockout pick, because he can sit at F6 for so long. And this is across the formats, by the way. I think in SuperCoach, his scoring is even more scaled up, because he does long kicks. He kicks them out at 50 and he's kicking them onto contests. We've seen players be able to get rewarded for those sorts of things. And he's actually a fairly accurate kicker. I think he's quite a good player. But in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, I think he's still viable to trade into. If you're worried and you want to get another look at these rookies, maybe we get another look at a side where he's not the sub, which is definitely on the cards for this week. Maybe we get a couple more debutants coming through, or maybe you just want to actually spend a little bit of cash because you're so loaded up. I think that he's one that I would really consider as an option. I think in SuperCoach and Dream Team, you can consider a Dudley. I think that he will get games through the year. There's a big concern in my mind as a Freo fan as to whether he loses his spot to Sam Switkowski, who is a test to come back in this week. I don't know how they'll structure up. There's a world that they actually shuffle it and they played the 4 smalls in all of Bolton, Switkowski, Reed, and Dudley in the team. But if that's the case, I think you might be living on borrowed time for someone like a Dudley. So I wouldn't. The pro is that he's absolute basement. You're getting every ounce of cash that you can off of a player. The con is that I don't think he has the most amazing job security, and particularly for Dream Team, I don't think he has the most amazing scoring. He'll be bolstered into SuperCoach because of the 1%ers and the pressure acts that he is able to provide.
Look, if it's the 20K difference between getting the guy you desperately want as the upgrade or not, I'm not opposed to it, but it's definitely not a high end priority to me. We've danced around a couple of players on this podcast, and this is definitely not going to be our longest episode, because I think it's a very condensed and very clear strategic week for what we've got to do. If you're a Will Day owner, it's a no-brainer trade, and you're probably taking him up to the best premium mid you can. If you've got DPP, predominantly defense is where you're more likely to look at. Swing that Sinclair in and go and get the other premium defender of your choice, whether that be a Sheasel at the top end or a Stewart as a halfway house. You've got options, right? Then if you're a Noddy owner, again, across the formats, if you don't have Bice, you're probably taking somebody down and you're flipping O'Driscoll up to the best available option. So it feels really clear and clinical about what you should be doing. And then you're just holding and hoping the likes of Lindsay, Nevitt, these guys kind of hold on. And that, for the goodness sake, Isaac Rankin plays this week. That's probably the next sort of thing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we've danced around a few names. We've called out Joel Frazier and to a lesser extent, a Sam de Koning. But there are some other mid prices in our teams that, because of these forced issues of O'Driscoll and Day predominantly, there's some others that are probably sneaking under the radar and not getting stuck in our team, but holding on probably longer than we'd ideally like. Probably the two biggest guilty associates would be Hugo Garcia. A Riley Sanders is probably the other that are just floating around. Joel Frazier, we've already alluded to. To a lesser extent, it's a Sam de Koning. But I've even heard some throw the likes of a Matt Roberts into that as well. Maybe that's just unfortunate off the back of one bad score, but we are getting to this space of upgrade season, but some of these mid prices are hanging around or giving us reasons to, like, I'll just give you one more week. I'll just give you one more week. I've got another forced issue. I'll give you one more week. And all of a sudden they might be scoring okay, but they're not really doing anything for you scoring wise or cash wise. What do we start doing when we get stuck in this mid price deathmatch territory with these guys? Because if we're not careful, we can keep justifying them away, and we get to the mid-season buys and it's, I still own Garcia, I still own Frazier, I still own Sanders, I still own whomever. And all of a sudden people are just gone past you. How do you know you're not delaying the inevitable versus prioritizing appropriately on the guys and the moves you should be making ahead of them?
I think this is why we advised pretty early on in the season to trade a lot of these sorts of players out, like Hollins, Perryman, Sanders. Yeah. Yes, they're going to pop a score every now and then. It's going to happen that they're going to pop a score and you go, oh, why did I trade them out? But they might just regress back to what they were scoring the week after, and you just don't know it. Someone like a Sanders had the exact same role that he's had probably the last 3 weeks, but ticked 2 goals, got in the end of a couple of +6 chains and got probably quite lucky to get the score he got. And whereas someone like Joel Frazier got on the reverse end of that, where he just doesn't get involved, he moves a little bit further outside, doesn't score nearly as much as what he was expected to. What the idea is that you've got to keep prioritizing the ones that aren't doing the job that they're meant to do. And this always comes back to the priority of what mid prices are there for. They're there to score points and they're there to go up in price. And the minute that they are not going up in price, probably means they're not scoring points. And that means they need to get out of your team, which is why, you throw Garcia in there. He popped 100, the week before. This week he pops a 40 score. He's probably got a relatively low break even still in AFL Fantasy. That's the reason why he can probably have one more week. But someone like a Joel Frazier has gone to 44, but he's already a lot higher in price. He hasn't had those high scores rolling through his 5-week price cycle anymore. That's why he becomes a higher priority. So someone like Sanders may have bought himself 1 to 2 more weeks in your team just because his break even will start to head back lower. Might also give you a bit of time to figure out who those DPP forwards are that are coming through next week, which will be interesting to look at. But he has to go soon. And it needs to be on your radar that if it's not this week and it's not next week, it needs to be probably at least within the next 3 weeks' time. So just always look at what they're priced at, have a look at what the break even is, have a look at what they've scored and what the fixtures are that are coming up, and use that to guide whether you think they are a priority trade out for your team.
One last question I want to ask you. Again, we promised you a sharper episode this week because, again, I think it's pretty clear and clinical the moves you need to make. Why over mansplain something for 20 minutes that we could do in 5? I want to ask you about Jason Horne-Francis because everything alludes to him that this is a ripping week to jump on from a break-even perspective. For those that went against him, outside of last week, it has gone perfectly to plan. Like it could not have gone any better. You went against the high ownership and barring, what is it, 120 in fantasy last week or 150, I think it's SuperCoach. Barring last round, you dodged the bullet. It's gone beautifully. But we've got 2 things surging at us this week. One is a bunch of new dual position players about to enter into the game. We're going to get some good, decent forward premiums, at least by reputation. Christian Petrarca, Nick Martin, James Peatling. Okay, we said good reputation, guys. But we're going to get a couple of these guys that historically have got 100 averages on their head. So you've got that surging. You've also got Levi Ashcroft is going to pick it up. We're going to get others picking it up that are probably in our teams. You've got a Hawthorn matchup that is crap for us to be able to go into. And we also don't really need another forward right now. That's probably the other element. And maybe the knock on why people aren't looking at a marriage too is it's like, I don't need another forward. So talk to me about these competing things that are happening at the moment, because you go, the break even's great. I'm absolutely buying low. The fixture's not great, but it's one game and it should still be okay. If he gets a little bit of score weighting and SuperCoach, I'm fine. But I'm about to get a Petrarca. I'm probably getting a Nick Martin. I might get some others. I'll get Levi Ashcroft on my field and I can attack in the midfield with some other upgrades. But he's probably a top 6 forward. Or is he? What's your take on Jason Horne-Francis? Because everything screams money-wise, this is the week to get him. Fixture, probably not. But there's a lot of variables around Jason Horne-Francis. Give me your thoughts about trading into him as a consideration for us this week.
So first thing I want to talk about is DPP.
Please.
Yes, we will get some big name mids that will pick up DPP, or big name defender even with someone like a Nick Martin potentially picking up forward status. But that shouldn't really put you off trading into these sorts of guys, particularly not in AFL Fantasy, because if they're value, they're value. The DPP will help in flexibility, but by this time of the year, every year, we end up running DPP mid forwards in our midfield just because of the way that the rookies tend to pick up, defender mid or mid forward status. And that's just how it is. There's nothing wrong with that. If Levi picks up forward status, which I'm pretty sure he's guaranteed to do, running him in your midfield isn't really going to hurt you because everyone's going to be wanting to field him anyways. So I think that's the first part of it. And then I want to kind of split the formats a bit. And I want to go to DT and SC first, and then I'll come back to AFL Fantasy afterwards. In Dream Team and SuperCoach, his break even has just gone through the floor because of the way that their price cycle works. Because he just had his 62 in AFL Fantasy, or 62 in Dream Team rather, and I think it was his 60 odd in SuperCoach. So yeah, wow. 61 in SuperCoach has just fallen out of the price cycle. And what's replaced that is 153 SuperCoach and 120 AFL Fantasy. If you don't own him this week and you don't trade into him this week, he will be going up in price fast. Now, that's the risky part. If you think he is anywhere near close enough to a top 6 forward, he is the jump on pick in those formats in this week. And at this stage, in the one format that I don't own him in of those 2, I am currently trading into him for that reason. AFL Fantasy is different. And it's different because it's a 5-round price cycle movement. His break even has not gone nearly as low as it has in those 2 formats. Granted, it still has gone down to, I think, about 77 or 78, which is reasonably low. And it is something that you have to consider this week. However, if you're wanting to wait that extra week and wanting to have a look at another midfielder instead who you think has a better matchup, or a defender who has a better matchup, then it's worthwhile waiting the week, because I don't see him doing 125 again. But if he does 100, it's probably only 10K up. His price hasn't moved nearly as far down. And it gives you that little bit of extra time that you might want to have a look at it. That being said, I can still get around a trade into him. I think that there has been a fire lit under not only his, but also Connor Rosie, Zach Butters, and a few of the other Port Adelaide players that says, if you don't perform, we are in trouble. And I think that's why you saw him really go hard on the weekend. I think Butters also tried quite hard. Rosie was subject to quite a hard tag at points during that game and suffered because of it. But they are struggling. They are 1-3, and they have to have something turn around. Otherwise, the season's over before it's even started. And what better match to do it in? As we just talked about early in the episode, against Hawthorn, who they've had a couple of close games against, and who they had a little bit of rivalry with in the 2 games last year. So I think that he is definitely someone that is worthy of consideration in AFL Fantasy. And if you think he's a top 6 forward, which I think he's probably close enough in DT and SC, someone that I would definitely be trading into this week.
Yeah, some good thoughts. So there you go. There's a lot to work through this week and not a lot of time to do it with another Thursday night game rolling around, the Crows, the Cats, and then everything rolling through with Gather Round. If you're heading over, it's going to be a ripper. I think some coaches panel members are going to be over there in Jordox and Louis, who's based over there as well. So make sure if you're at the footy and you see run into any of those boys, they'll be there. I'd say you'd know Jordox as a loud, obnoxious Adelaide fan, but there'll be at least 50,000 of those. And so just yell
you're
at
not
Jordox.
Going, aren't you?
No, I said loud and obnoxious.
I thought you were talking about your hair.
Oh, don't you start. Don't you start. Hey, thanks so much, MiniMonk. It's been a pleasure talking to you with a big week of trades, a big week of strategy to unpack, and it's been a pleasure chatting to it with you, despite the hair reference. I appreciate you, mate.
No, it's been good to be on. And if you've got any questions about this week, because I know it's a bit of a trickier one, we've got the Patreon, which you always plug. Shoot us a message in there. I'm active in those chats. Otherwise, give me a ping on X, and I'll try and get back to you if I can.
There you go. Make sure you check that out. If you're not a part of our Patreon, mate, you've got to jump in. You can jump in at as low as $2 a month, where you get involved in not only those group chats that get involved right inside the Patreon app, but also you get a weekly Q&A episode that only Patreons get to ask questions and only Patreons get to hear the answers. You can make sure you go and check that out. You can also jump up to the premium tier and get a weekly round review podcast as an extra bonus for you as well. That's right. Every single freaking day of the week, you can hear my voice if you're a part of the premium Patreon. Probably could have sold that a little bit better. That might not be the way you actually want to jump in. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below and let us know, what are the trades and the strategy moves you're looking at making? We'd love to know. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, my friend, jump on it. It's a click of a button and it's a huge help for us. Of course, these are also available as audio podcasts wherever you get your audio podcasts from. Subscribe, give us the 5 stars. And if you're listening on an Apple podcast platform, make sure to leave a positive review. It's a small little thing that it feels like for you, I know, but it makes a big impact for us. So we'd appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, inside the description of this episode are not only the links for all of that, but also where you can get in touch with us across social media, the Coaches Panel stuff, MiniMonk as well. And you can get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch still. They're still moving out the doors, whether it's hats, hoodies, T-shirts, the works. It is all sitting in there. Hey, good luck to you this week as we head into Best 22. I hope it is kind for you. I hope Rookie Roulette isn't a roulette at all and you nail it right out of the gate, that your VC option pops and that you've got a nice outlet to be able to take it and not have to stress on a Saturday night or a Sunday. Good luck this week. We hope Gather Round is kind to you on your fantasy team, and we'll be back with you chatting real soon, all things AFL Fantasy and SuperCoach.